right now. Will Congress give him the red light? Movement on Capitol Hill as the president seeks approval for an attack on Syria, but the outcome still far from certain. Next, the political impact of Syria back here stateside. We'll tell you what the latest poll numbers are, and we'll also tell you whether or not the president has weakened himself into a lame duck here, depending on the vote, or has he just outflanked his critics yet again? And are there similar consequences for what looks like a Republican split on Syria? And then we'll switch gears and move closer to home as the candidates who might actually end up as mayor of New York enter the frenzied final week of the campaign. This guy, he may not win, but he's doing everything he can to stay in the headlines. I'm talking about Mr. Weiner, of course. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday, the 4th of September. A lot to get to. But where we start, of course, is both in Syria and in Washington. And once again, all of Washington and much of this country is focused on one single question. Will the United States launch an attack on Syria to retaliate for that nation's use of chemical weapons on its own people? Well, the White House continued to make its case, pressing for congressional approval today, and the president himself, he spoke out as well. We're going to get to the latest here. I want to bring in Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, for that, because you have two date lines. You have obviously Washington, and then you also have Sweden, where the president, seemingly in the most unscripted and I think unvarnished comments yet, made the case on why he thinks we should, and also made the case on why he thinks others shouldn't stand in the way.
And we'll play a large portion of the president's comments from Sweden in just a minute, Rich. But let's start in Washington, as the president's top advisors spent a second straight day on Capitol Hill trying to convince lawmakers to approve that strike on Syria. The president's action plan cleared its first legislative hurdle, but it's still far from clear whether Congress will actually approve military action against the Damascus regime.
After yesterday's all-day White House pitch to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, today that committee became the first to pass a resolution allowing force against Syria. The vote, tight, 10-7, with one senator essentially abstaining. And today, the Syria sales team of Kerry and Hagel made its case on the House side of the Capitol.
The United States must demonstrate through our actions that the use of chemical weapons is unacceptable.
Several congressional leaders have indicated they are backing President Obama, but right now there isn't enough committed support to pass authorization for a strike against Syria in either the House or Senate. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul is an adamant no, but he says he expects the Senate will sign off.
The only chance of stopping what I consider to be bad policy will be in the House.
While Congress debates in Washington, President Obama kept up the pressure on lawmakers from overseas.
I think we will be stronger as a country in our response if the president and Congress does it together.
In Sweden this morning, the president would not say what he would do if Congress doesn't approve a strike, but
the moral thing to do is not to stand by and do nothing.
He was defensive when asked whether military action is necessary in order for him to save face.
My credibility is not on the line. The international community's credibility is on the line. And America and Congress's credibility is on the line.
The president's next stop is Russia, where today President Vladimir Putin said a unilateral U.S. strike against Syria would be, quote, an aggression.
Now back to the president's comments in Sweden. In the interest of context, here are the president's complete and unedited comments on Syria and on red lines from earlier today.
First of all, I didn't set a red line. The world set a red line. The world set a red line when governments representing 98% of the world's population said the use of chemical weapons are abhorrent and passed a treaty forbidding their use even when countries are engaged in war. Congress set a red line when it ratified that treaty. Congress set a red line when it indicated that in a piece of legislation titled the Syria Accountability Act that some of the horrendous things that are happening on the ground there need to be answered for. And so when I said in a press conference that my calculus about what's happening in Syria would be altered by the use of chemical weapons, which the overwhelming consensus of humanity says is wrong. That wasn't something I just kind of made up. I didn't pluck it out of thin air. There's a reason for it. So that's point number one. Point number two, my credibility is not on the line. The international community's credibility is on the line. And America and Congress's credibility is on the line because we give lip service to the notion that these international norms are important.
As we try to keep track of where a Syria strike authorization stands, there are a few yardsticks we're keeping tabs on. 3 separate polls now show either majority or plurality opposition to even limited airstrikes in Syria. Not one national poll has shown public support. Meanwhile, the Washington Post is keeping a whip count of votes on Capitol Hill. Right now, the president has just 18 solid yes votes with 20 solid no's. John McCain flipped from yes to no today. That in the U.S. Senate, 62 senators remain undecided or silent. Also more no's than yeses on the House side, though the vast majority of House members have yet to declare a position either way. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you. And while it looks like, as you heard from before, Senator Paul and even some critics is going to get through the Senate, it's no sure thing in the House here. And as Andrew said, the American public very conflicted on this. Okay. When we come back, we're going to take the temperature of our panel in a moment. But first, I want to bring you into our conversation. Do you think the U.S. should take military action against Syria? And if you think so, why? And if you don't, I want to know why not. Reach out to us on our Facebook and Twitter accounts and tell us what you think. And next, we're also going to ask if the White House has made its case on Syria yet. Lawmakers starting to vote on military action. But the question is, if you had a vote, how would you cast it? I'm going to ask that to our panel here. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.